The comics industry in the Philippines has been present since Jose Rizal drew The Monkey and the Tortoise in 1886. Then, in 1929, the comics industry in the Philippines emerged, and it was called as the Platinum Years of Comics in the Philippines. During this period, there were two kinds of comics that were popular: entertainment and editorial comics. The first comic that was published under Liwayway magazine was an entertainment comic called Mga Kabalbalan ni Kengkoy, written by Romulo Ramos and illustrated by Tony Velasquez. Editorial comics were printed mostly in the Philippines Free Press, and the content of these comics were about political and social criticisms. Some of the creators of these comics were Easy Izon and Ireneo Miranda. In 1942, Tony Velasquez created a series called Kalibapi Family for Tribune magazine, the newspaper that could circulate during the time when the Japanese Imperial Army occupied Manila. The 50s till the early 70s were considered as the golden age of comics in the Philippines. New titles such as Tagalog Classics and Hiwaga Comics came through after the war. The genres became more diverse during this period. Hence, the rise of comics about Philippine mythology, myths, and superheroes. Creators of the comics during these periods were Alfredo Alcala, creator of Action Comics, Francisco Conching, creator of Pedro Penduko, and Mars Ravelo, creator of Darna and Captain Barbell. This was also the period when comics were adapted to films. In the 70s, there was a decline in the production of comics because of the declaration of martial law. The comics written during martial law were about praising the Marcoses' programs. Tony Velasquez wrote a fantasy novel about the Green Revolution of Imelda Marcos. After lifting the martial law, the comics industry began to generate new readership. Genre like heavy drama arose in the industry. Supernovels were born after the martial law as well. Average comics only had a length of 20 issues, while supernovels were comics that contained more than 50 issues. Dominating this field were writers like Pablo S. Gomez, known for Campanerang Cuba and Petrang Caballo, and Nerissa Cabral, known for Between Walang Ningning. Superheroes were still present in the scene like Carlo J. Caparaces, Ang Panday, and Totoy Bato. In the late 80s, Paul Medina Jr.'s Pugad Baboy illustrated about the social-political issues and represented them through his characters. The comic strip mirrors relevant topics such as corruption in the government and shows some of the problems the society faces. In the 90s, there was a sudden downfall in the comics industry. Production had declined because of the introduction of alternative platforms like television and the internet. From 200,000 copies a week of publication, the average circulation of comics dropped to 2,000 copies a week in 2004. People also became practical about purchasing comics, and most people who wanted to purchase them were young buyers. Another factor to this downfall was Filipinos diverted to telenovelas. Stories that were on comics were recreated as TV series. In 2004, a new group of young artists, writers, and fans called Comicero Artist Group organized the first Comic-Con convention at UP Diliman. From then on, many conventions are being held across the country in places like Baguio, Cebu, San Pablo City, Quezon City, Los Baños City, and Iloilo City. In 2007, Mango Comics and Sterling Paper Products collaborated to bring back low-cost traditional-style Filipino comics. The project was led by Carlo J. Caparas. When the Sterling Mango relationship ended, he created the National Comics Congress and the Comics Caravan. Sponsored by the National Commission for Culture and Arts, or the NCCA, the idea of the caravan was to lead script writing seminars and bring comic exhibits across the country. In the present time, a new generation of writers, artists, and publishers have taken over the comics industry, and they gather at Comic-Con. Comic-Con is a convention where artists, publishers, and writers gather to market and sell their work to fellow comic book fans. Thanks to the internet, some of the local comics showcased at Comic-Con are also available online through their websites or Facebook pages. And that's it. That's the history of the Philippine comic industry. Thanks for watching!